on, everybody? This is Sean of Raw Select Music, and instead of talking about a new record or talking about records that I picked up recently, or even talking about a record label, which I did in my last video, today I want to talk about one of my all-time favorite records, and a record that will never, ever leave my collection. And that record would have to be Cortex.
Troupeau Bleu.
So as you can guess by that little use of Google Translate, I can't speak a lick of French. So I don't know how much this record is on people's radar, but you've probably heard little bits and pieces of this before if you're a fan of hip-hop. And thankfully, on the 2013 reissue, on the sticker, it actually lists some of the people that have used this record before, so I don't have to worry about the sample police coming after me for giving away trade secrets. So some of the people that have used this record include Madlib for both J-Lib, his hip-hop project that he did with J Dilla, or at the time JD, MF Doom, which surprisingly is the exact same beat from that J-Lib project. It's a good beat. Tyler the Creator, Rick Ross, Fat Joe, and also Flying Lotus for his Captain Murphy project, which is probably the sample most people know from this record. So it's definitely made the rounds in the hip-hop universe, or the hip-hop music sphere. And there's probably a really good reason for it, that it's a fantastic album. This is one of the few albums that I can honestly say I really enjoy listening to front to back. And I want to tell you a little bit why I think you should check this album out. One of the reasons this is one of my favorite records of my collection is because it manages to pull from so many different genres and make it cohesive and really make a unique sound. So Cortex was doing this in France, and as another example of a band who's done this before, this is another classic album that will never leave my collection, and this is Azimuth, I think I said that right, their debut album. But where this record basically starts from samba, or Brazilian music, and using that as its starting point and pulling influences into that sound, this record starts from basically like French pop and then pulls other influences into it to help form its sound. And on this record, you'll hear little bits of jazz, funk, soul, and also, surprisingly, a little bit of Brazilian music as well. And the ability to take all of those different influences, do them well and convincingly, and make a sound of your own, I think is pretty impressive, and that alone makes this album worth listening to. Looking at the cover of this album, you probably wouldn't guess that those are the sort of sounds that you're going to be hearing on this album. It's, as you can see just by looking at it, it's a pretty sparse, pretty barren, kind of cold, slightly eerie, maybe even a little bit mysterious. And that's actually pretty indicative of the music on here. And part of that is due in no small part to the vocals that are on this album. So, as you might have guessed, I do not speak a lick of French and haven't really bothered to look at the lyrics themselves and see what they're actually talking about. Because quite honestly, I kind of like just allowing the vocals to become another instrument in the band. And without being able to understand the lyrics, it really doesn't take anything away from this album, and it actually just sort of adds to the eerie mysteriousness of that album. So, and in that regard, I kind of like it that way and prefer to keep the mystery intact rather than trying to solve it. Speaking of instruments, the musicianship that's on here is just absolutely phenomenal. Whether it's the drums, which I'll definitely be coming back to the drums, the organ and piano, bass, horns, saxophone, everybody on here is just absolutely top-notch. Another thing that I would say that's top-notch on this album is the arrangements. everything feels like it's pretty tightly controlled in terms of each song melodically has a very definite start, middle, and end, and even the little points in between of where the song is going to go melodically. But as someone who listens to a lot of funk and soul, I generally tend to prefer things a little bit looser, a little bit more sloppy, and with a little bit of improv going on as well. And I'd say, in terms of the way that they play, there's definitely a little bit of sloppiness and a little bit of imperfection going on. It doesn't feel so tight and mechanical that it loses any of its soul. But where the songs go melodically feel like they're pretty scripted. And while that's could be to its detriment, these songs are just so interesting melodically, with so much, they're so dynamic in their sound that is definitely not the case on here. And I would say as much as the vocals, the instrumentation, and the arrangements, they all sort of come together to really just create a truly unique sound. And finally, while I'm singing the praises of this record, I'm going to come back to the drums on here. Because while at first glance, looking at this record, you really wouldn't think that the drums are as prominent as they actually are. The drums are so upfront in this record and represent such a strong characteristic of the sound of this record that they need to be mentioned. Their hi-hats are super crisp, and it also has a snare sound to it that's so distinctive. I can't really think of another snare that sounds like the one that's on here. And it also just helps that they're really, really funky and fit the music so perfectly. And just, for a record that can be sort of gentle and sort of sparse and loose, the drums taking up as much of the mix as they do is not only surprising, but it just actually makes this record that much more interesting. At least it does for me. And I'll stop babbling about the drums, and I want to get to actually one minor little quibble that I have about this record. The only small negative that I have about this album is the last track, Mad Bass. As I said before, this is a pretty tightly arranged track, and that's why the last track on here, Mad Bass, really just sticks out as a sore thumb. Should be noted, I don't think it's a bad track, I just don't think it fits on here, because it's the only song on here that feels like the band got in the studio free of whoever arranged this record, and we're just allowed to play around and hash out a song together. It's fun, it's playful, it's definitely funky. It just really doesn't fit the overall mood of this record. I don't hate it, I actually do kind of enjoy it, but as far as whether or not, if it were axed from the record, would it make a difference? Probably wouldn't. But again, it's a small little blemish on an otherwise, for me, nearly flawless record that I still enjoy listening to front to back on a regular basis. So overall, if you're looking for a pretty unique record that has a very distinct sound that pulls from a variety of different genres, funk, jazz, soul, Brazilian music, all under the umbrella of French pop, which, come on, French pop, why wouldn't you want to listen to French pop? Sarcasm aside, highly recommend that you check out this album. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for today. If you like this Playing Favorites series, or if you like anything that I'm doing, please subscribe. Definitely give this video a thumbs up. And also, please hit me up in the comments. I really want to know what you guys are thinking out there and what sort of stuff that you'd like me to do in the future. I'm still, again, playing around with these ideas and really just trying to see what direction sort of sticks for this channel. When the weather isn't quite so shitty outside, I'll probably do a little bit more outdoor stuff. I do have an idea for a record blog coming up in the future, doing a little bit of record shopping, which I thought might be kind of fun. And yeah, that's pretty much it from me. As always, go into the description and check out my WordPress or Steemit blog, because that's where I put all the links to this music. And if you want to see me do more old records instead of not always constantly, but talking about older records rather than newer records, let me know, because I definitely have no shortage of records that I'd like to share with you. But as always, thanks again for watching. Follow me on social media if you want. I'm always I always want to hear from you guys. But until the next review, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.